going into very serious times, but I'm kind of looking forward to it. This slow rotting, this marination in this false reality that only big government can create has made us weak. And we don't really learn about our mettle until we get tested. The Drudge Report is top linked in red to our story. I was just over visiting drudgereport.com and looking at these stories about hundreds of youth running around, rioting inside of a mall and gunshots outside. And now the news is, and the police are saying it may have been organized on the internet. Oh, so the government needs to censor the web now. Well, how about using social media for flash mobs for liberty and freedom, not for lawlessness? But I was over there looking at those stories that I was going to cover next hour after our guest leaves us. And, you know, dead fish cover 20 miles of Arkansas River. Thousands of birds fall from sky. Connected to government testing, ? And my only issue, as I said earlier, if government's always been doing this over and over again, why isn't government being looked at? Going back to that question from earlier, Stefan, because I really want your insightful view on this. Why does anyone trust or like government when government is the author of almost all major crimes, the only author of giant mass murder in the hundreds of thousands and millions, when every major government is constantly caught testing deadly chemical, biologicals, and radiologicals on populations? Why does the public, through, I guess, some kind of, what's the psychological disorder where people love their abusers?
Well, Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, is it Stockholm Syndrome, or Stockholm by proxy? Well, I mean, there's that question as I'm ranting here, but then also, why does government, again, spin this same type of web every time?
Well, I think it really is the essential question, because the fundamentals of what we're talking about in the freedom movement are so simple. It's so simple. It is like saying stealing is bad, violence is bad, except in self-defense. This is kindergarten morality, right? Don't hit, don't steal, don't punch, and keep your word. Everything we're talking about is so simple. It's not like we're trying to convince pygmies of Einstein's theory of relativity. We're talking about very, very simple things here. And the question I've always struggled with, Alice, is why is it so hard for people to understand these basic things? And I think there's a couple of answers I'll just touch on briefly here. I don't claim to have a monopoly on the answers, but the first is, of course, the Stockholm Syndrome, that the government raises most people. They spend more time with the government than they do with their parents, than they do with their community. And so what happens is they end up loving the government, so to speak. They end up attached to this authority figure that they imprinted upon. It's like you see those ducks in nature shows that imprint upon an orange balloon, and then they just follow that balloon around. It's just an imprinting.
Instead, they've imprinted on the blood-drinking slug.
Well, sure, except they see it as a guardian angel or whatever, right? So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that people don't like to try to reduce power, because then they'll find out that they can't, right? So even Sam Harris, who seems a scientist and a rationalist, is talking for, increased government power in the economy and a world government and so on. And why are they doing that? Because people like to feel like they're having an effect on changing things. And every time you go to the government and say, I think you should have more power, the government says, I'm with you, man. I'm with you, brother. 150%. That's a great idea. And then things change. You want to pass another law. You want to raise a new tax. You want to punish someone else. That all works. So people like getting behind that tank rolling down the hill and pushing it because they feel like they're having some effect. You try and reduce the power of government, you'll realize just how little power you really have in your society.
Very well said. And the social engineers are masters at steering that foaming at the mouth mob that the Founding Fathers warned us about so much. We'll be right back in 60 seconds with our guest. Stay with us. But in the 4 minutes we've got left, Stefan, I want to thank you for joining us, A. B, other points that you see on the horizon for 2011. Do you think that the awakening, that we can really say 2010 was the year of the awakening, or do you think I'm wrong on that point?
I think that
we are still in the process of awakening. Obviously, it's not a sort of bookended black and white deal. I think that the amount of energy that we need to pursue, that we need to invest in waking people up has never been greater. I think 2011 is going to be a make or break year. I mean, there is obviously momentum in the downward movement. We need to try and get people to wake up. On the plus side, people are getting enough empirical evidence and emotional uneasiness about where the system is. Everybody gets deep down that the current system is completely unsustainable, particularly with the explosion in astounding deficits over the past two years. Really since the war, but since the wars began. So people get mathematically, fundamentally, you don't have to be a PhD in mathematics to know that we are in a completely unsustainable situation. Everybody understands this. The unemployed, tragic though it is a wake-up call. You know, the system is no longer working for you. Middle-class incomes have stagnated or declined since the 1970s, since we went off the residuals of the gold standard, and which is entirely predictable. People get that the dollar has lost over 90% of its value since the Fed came in. Ron Paul, in talking about auditing the Fed, is waking people up to the fact that they swim in this ocean of fantasy money, which is bleeding away their resources. So the fact is there's so much evidence that we're not talking about an island over the horizon that we're afraid of hitting. It's within sight.
That's right. We're here, and that was the point I was trying to make. I mean, to quantify it, I'm saying I see 2010 as the time when the momentum began to shift, and I saw a greater amount of awakening in that 1 year than I'd seen in the previous 10. So I see that as a quantum acceleration, but also I see the gun coming out of the holster, as you said, where the Secretary of Defense openly says last week, I don't care what the American people want, or if 65% are against the Afghan war, it's going to continue. I mean, they're really being more brazen.
Yeah, and what have we always heard? If you have nothing to hide, you should not be afraid of scrutiny. Well, of course, with WikiLeaks, we can turn that exact same question back to the government and say, if you have nothing to hide, why are you afraid of some scrutiny? And the government can, of course, rifle through our bank accounts and our internet activities and our health records and anything else that you could imagine, or our tax records. But the moment we turn that light back on the government, they start calling for the assassination of a foreign national who has broken no U.S. laws. They're calling for a hit. This is something out of a mafia movie, and it's gone without significant comment in the mainstream media. A hit has been called out for on Julian Assange. That is kind of a thing that once you see it and once you point it out, you can't really go back to the cuddly government that's just interested in protecting you from dangerous people overseas. So I think that the violence, the hysteria, the aggression, the panic, and the disasters are accumulating to such a degree that when you say the system is fundamentally broken, people will agree. Now, when you say it's fundamentally unrepairable, people still have a problem, but at least they know that something has to change, and they also don't want it to change for the worse. We still have enough residual of classical liberalism, of libertarianism, of, you could say, even the ancient Greek devotion to personal liberty. We have enough of that residual left that we can still turn it around, but we really have to get behind this wheel and push and push and push.
Stefan Molyneux, I want to do 3-4 minutes with you on the other side, because I want you to really be able to boil down your political view, because when you call yourself a classical liberal, that's what I call myself. A modern conservative will think then that we're communist. I mean, they've really changed the terms. So I want to get down to terms and language. If you read 1984, he was just covering and you know, putting down in fiction what he'd already witnessed, working for government, working for communist, working for BBC, working for the imperial police in India. And George Orwell, a.k.a. Eric Blair, or vice versa, you know, he wrote about destroying the language, reducing it down to where basically humans just make noise, you know, 5 or 6 noises like a chimpanzee or like a cow. And now I see the studies out all over the world. The language is shrinking. People can't communicate. They take it as threatening if you can form complex ideas. But I don't think humanity is irrevocably broken. But when you say something like, you know, a classical liberal, the average dumbed-down mainline conservative, who isn't conservative at all, they love the big defense budgets, they love it all, they think that means you're saying you're a communist, when a classical liberal is the opposite, aren't they?
There's no word left that hasn't been polluted by statism through which you can describe yourself as a freedom lover. So if you say, well, I'm a pacifist in that I oppose the initiation of force, then people think that you just want to lie down and have people go through your pockets and you're not in self-defense. So you can't use that. You can't use anarchist because then people associate that with idiots throwing bombs in malls, as you say, and there's not any particular coherence to that, even though people like Noam Chomsky call themselves anarchists. That's just not how the media portrays it. If you call yourself a liberal, people think that you're into big government programs. If people think if you're a conservative, then people think that you want government to restrict gay marriage or whatever. So we've really been crowded out at the discourse, which is why I simply say I'm a philosopher. There are certain conclusions that I accept as a result of the rational application of philosophy. So I try not to describe my conclusions because I don't want to be identified by the conclusions. Like if you're a biologist, you don't say, well, I'm a Darwinist, right? You just say, well, I accept certain theories of evolution as scientifically valid or whatever. So you don't want to, I think I really try to avoid identifying myself by my conclusions, right? That I accept that a state and society is the only rational and consistent application of the non-aggression principle. There's no group of human beings that you can fence off and give virtually limitless power to and not have it turn out badly. I mean, that's just not a good idea at all. It's not how people organize neighborhood blocks. Like if they want to protect their neighborhood, they don't just give a tank and a bomber and an army to some guy on the street corner and say, well, you take care of it all, because they know that that's going to end up badly. So I try to avoid conclusions. What I try to do is to say, well, I'm a philosopher, I accept reason, I accept evidence, and therefore this is where it leads. And hopefully people will start thinking along those lines. But yeah, you're right, there's no word left that you can describe. You say, what are you? As, I don't know, carbon-based life form is the best I can come up with. So you're right, the language has been really polluted, and that is a great challenge for people.
I mean, I find myself every day, I say I'm exposing the left-right paradigm because if you can shatter that and show how they divide us from each other so that we can be played off against each other instead of going after the actual social engineers, those that seek to limit knowledge, those that seek to dumb us down so we're more easily managed. But then to even communicate with the general public, I have to use left-right paradigm terms to then even introduce them to new ideas. And again, I don't even claim to have that sophisticated of a worldview. I just know that the direction we're going in is absolutely destructive by any historical, common sense, philosophical perspective. Stefan, it was great talking to you. I look forward to talking to you again in the near future. Good to have you here with us as one of the first guests in 2011.
Thank you so much, Alex, and a very happy new year to you and to all of your guests. And let's make this the year where we gain real traction and begin to really turn this thing around in a powerful way. And it's really important that people act decisively and concertedly and intelligently, because if it's not us, who is it going to be? And if it's not now, when is it going to be? The time's running out. So thank you so much for the conversation. I really do appreciate it.